Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will talk about Spike missile. Aiming to boost its arsenal and firepower against enemies, Indian Army has placed an order for procuring Israeli anti-tank guided missile Spike. Now, these missiles are known for their precision targeting with an ability to pierce even bunkers. This order was placed after the central government gave powers to 3 armed forces to make emergency purchases. Spike missiles can hit targets at a range of 4 kilometers and can be deployed in both plains and mountains. Now, these missiles have the capability to fire, observe, update, fire and forget, and attack hidden targets. For more on these missiles and what exactly they bring to the Indian Army, we have with us a distinguished panel of guests today. Let me introduce them to you, beginning with Retired Major General Ravi Arora, Chief Editor of Indian Military Review with us. We also have with us Retired Major General P.K. Chakravorty, a defense expert, and Mr. Sudhi Ranjan, a Senior Editor of Hindustan Times. Let me begin with you, General Arora, and let's give our viewers a little bit of an overview. Spike is made by the Israeli manufacturer Rafael, and it's an entire family, long range, short range, medium range. What are we looking at when we say that Indian Army is going to procure Spike missiles? Which version and how is it different from others?
Okay. So let me just give a brief overview what is important in an anti-tank guided missile for the infantry, because this is being procured for the infantry. Number one is generation. There is first generation, second and third generation. We have had first and second generation anti-tank weapons, not necessarily missiles, which means there is no seeker, there is no guidance. First generation is you aim and fire. We had the bazooka, we had the RPG-7 rocket, we had the 106 millimeter Jeep mounted recoilless rifle, we called it. Now these were ranges from 300 meters to 1000 meters. No guidance. You had to aim optically, and if it hit the target, it did. Then we had second generation Milan 2 missile. Second generation essentially meant that you could fire the missile and track the missile through a joystick or optically until it hit the target. You had to keep tracking that target. And third generation is at the time of launch, if your missile is pointing at the target, you press the button and it goes and it chases that target even if it is moving. You fire it and forget about it.
Fire and forget is that function.
It will hit the target. Second was the weight. Now, it had to be shoulder fired or it could be used by the infantry mounted on a vehicle. And the third was range. Ranges we had earlier. The Milan, which we have at the moment, has got 2 kilometers range. The Spike LR, which we are getting, long range, has got 4 kilometers range. Now, Spike family is third generation. It is fire and forget. And it has various versions, starting with the short range, the medium range, the long range, and then long range there are 2 versions, and the extended range also has 2 versions and an LOS, ranging from 2 kilometers to 25 kilometers. Depending on which version, it can be mounted on a helicopter, a vehicle, or it can be fired on a tripod from the ground, or it can be fired from the shoulder. We are getting the Spike LR, which can be fired on the ground, on a tripod, or mounted. And it has a range of 4 kilometers. It will hit the target no matter what. It also has top attack capability. Tanks from the top are least protected. The armor protection is lesser than the sides or front. And also, very important, it does have a fiber optic cable which is not used for controlling or homing, but it can be used for changing the target. If suddenly you find another target appears which must be taken on, the operator or the firer can change the missile to hit the other target.
Okay.
So this is what Spike is all about.
Okay. So that's an overview. Let me bring in General Chakravorty here. General Chakravorty, when we look at the tank warfare, and we are specifically today talking about ATGM, that's anti-tank guided missile. So how things have changed over the years in terms of ATGM, and when we talk about Spike LR or other versions of Spike, what does it pack?
See, the whole issue is that in any form of warfare, in tank warfare, you don't get a second chance. That's the first thing to be seen. That is, you have to hit it at the first instance. Otherwise, the tank will get you. That's the first simple thing. Next, if you take the Spike versions, if you look at it, the Britishers, they went in for the NLOS way back in, I'm going to say about 10 years ago. So, and where did they go in for? I mean, so there's the point to be seen. They went in Iraq itself. So if you look at this, look at the issues of which spike came in at what range, it is possibly all coming in together. As you correctly brought out, you looked at initially the battle was in visual range. Today you are looking at, as you yourself gave in the introduction, one is fire and forget, the other is fire, observe and forget. Now look at the difference between the two. Fire and forget means you fire it, and then the seeker, that means there has to be a seeker, which could be either an image, which is an IIR. I won't go into the technical details too much, but that will be seeking the target and getting onto it. That is your fire. Now you come to fire observe. That means the lock-on is taking place before the weapon itself is launched. Whereas if you take as far as the what you call the fire observe and what you call then you engage the target. In that case, what you would be doing is the weapon is fired, it goes into the air and then locks on. Need not be fiber optics, can have a radio link also. The choice of fiber optic cable and a radio link for shorter distances, 4 kilometers fiber optics. Now let's say even let's say, I'm going to say what we get and what we don't get is a matter of what actually the Ministry of Defense and the Indian Army decides with Rafale. So really I wouldn't comment on it. But now coming on to this issue, whether we are getting the Mark II of that, which is a little more longer, moment you cross 4 kilometers, fiber optic cables will have no meaning. You have to have radio links. And after all, we are having telemetric links with so many missiles which are firing.
Okay.
We can fire any missile and you got a telemetric link. So it's a very minor issue of this. What I'm coming now to is the main thing about Spike. Well, it's got a tandem warhead, which has not been brought out. It's very important. What is a tandem warhead? See, today, since you have asked me about tanks, you must understand today tanks are having explosive reaction armor. So today, if you are contacting, the explosive is bound to contact. So that is the first one which is observed. And next is HE anti-tank. Now when you have an HEAT, the whole thing is the function of an HEAT is that it does not immediately explode like what a kinetic round would do. That's immediately on contact, it's not going to explode. It's going to first take hit, after hitting it's going to come back and then the wave will go in. So your penetration is very deep. Now what does it mean? And the third thing is brought out, when you can lock, that is after launch, and in which case you are observing, you're going to do a top attack.
Okay.
So top attack means your ability to what you call hit the tank is better.
Okay.
Why are we going in for it? Obvious, it's very obvious that today, undoubtedly, you would like to engage tanks which are very difficult to spot. You not wait for a tank to prop up. Today, whole battle is going to be that you are not going to see what is going to happen.
About tracking hidden targets
tracking,
and
tracking
aiming at
and
them.
this thing. And so therefore, I think it's a great step which has been taken, as he has correctly brought out in this. The next I want to also say, please don't forget that we have got the line of control which is all perennially active. I mean, so we don't have to wait for anybody, anyone can fire. And bunkers and various weapons play a very important role. The Spike will do a great job over there.
Okay. And it will add that, give that boost to the firepower and arsenal as well. Let me bring in Sudhi here. And Sudhi, I'd like to bring you on the timeline of the Spike missile deal only, because earlier also there was a deal which was being done with Rafale Industries of Israel for procuring Spike, but that was put on hold. And now this one is an emergency purchase by the Indian Army. So why, a turnaround? Why a change of heart here?
See, the emergency purchase, from what we understand by speaking to various people, is because, it's slightly affected by what we saw happened in, the Pulwama strike, the suicide strike. We went in with our aircrafts, we hit the Jaish-e-Mohammed terror camps deep inside Pakistan. In fact, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is Pakistan, it's not POK, there were chances of it spilling over. There were chances of, that strike becoming something big. The emergency purchase is to immediately bring in, ability, firepower, capability into the military, so that in case we see something in the future, because you can never expect Pakistan to give up, say, its, policy of using quote-unquote non-state actors. So you need to strengthen the military. And this is exactly why these are coming in. They're much reduced numbers, but this will be good enough in case of a skirmish. And the reason why we haven't gone in for the huge, earlier, bigger order is, of course, because DRDO is developing a man-portable anti-tank guided missile, and it's likely to come in. So if you look at timelines that way, I would say that it will come in for the spike within the next 6 to 9 months. That's how quickly it will come in.
Okay, General, now that Sudhi has mentioned that DRDO's development and the circumstances in which we are purchasing this missile from Israel, how would you look at both these missiles, the one which is being developed by the DRDO and the one which we are purchasing from Israel now?
Okay. The first is the requirement. We have got 426 infantry battalions, which includes, the special forces and all. So not all of them require anti-tank missiles because of the sectors that they are deployed in. Each of the battalions has 4 Milan launchers. This is what Spike or any other missile will replace. Not necessarily. This order for 12 launchers and 240 missiles is a very small order. This is for some separate purpose. Now, if everybody has to be given 4 missile launchers and the authorized missiles, it comes to about 17 to 1800 missile launchers. Initially, the deal you spoke of was for 321 launchers and 8,300 missiles, which would suffice for 1 launcher to each battalion. And then subsequently 1,500 launchers and 30,000 missiles would be manufactured in India. The components would be manufactured by a joint venture between Rafael and Kalyani, and the components supplied to BDL, who would produce the same missile in India.
That was the original deal.
That was the original plan. But DRDO was developing the Nag missile basically for vehicle mounting on a BMP and for the helicopter. And they were having some problems. It was delayed. But meanwhile, when this requirement came in, DRDO was asked, and a private company was also asked whether you can provide a solution. And they have assured that within 2 years, we will provide a shoulder-fired solution akin to the Spike. So it remains to be seen whether that will come or not. Meanwhile, under the emergency powers, 12 launches means it can only be used for special missions, and 240 missiles. Emergency powers means the Vice Chief of Army Staff, who is vested with these powers of up to 500 crore rupees of purchases, does not have to go to the defense minister to utilize his powers. So these are being acquired under those powers. Well, over time, when these are used in training and in operations, we will know whether DRDO is able to fulfill its promise, or whether private industry can fulfill their promise, and whether we should go ahead with acquiring these missiles or not.
Okay.
Now, the Nag missile being developed by DRDO is a 45 kg missile, similar to Spike, but entirely developed for IFVs and for helicopters. Shoulder fired means it has to have lesser weight, say around 25 kilos at best. That is the launcher, and missile itself is 8 to 14 kilos. This missile, Spike, is 14 kilos. The short range one is 8 kilos. And if it is lighter, it has lesser range.
Lesser range.
So, Nag, which is being produced or promised to be produced for the infantry, should have similar range, about 4 kilometers, or a short range missile having a range of 2 kilometers. These are big challenges, considering for the last 10 years, Nag has been under development. The main problem has been with the Seeker, which is the most technological part of it. We do hope DRDO succeeds and we get an indigenous solution and we are able to equip the army with larger numbers.
Okay. General Chakravorty, I remember on this show itself, we having a discussion on this version of DRDO's, man-portable anti-tank missile. So, in your view, when we do a comparison from what the DRDO is trying to achieve and what we have got now, or procuring now through this emergency purchase, how would you look at both these options available?
See, first is an emergency purchases for an emergency which he brought out. I mean, it's a Pulwama attack. See, the whole issue is the army would need something, and as he correctly brought out, it's not a huge order, just 12 launchers and 240 missiles for an use in an emergent situation. And the emergent situations are quite visible to us what they are. That is one part. The second is the DRDO part and our basic procurement, what we were looking at. There were two competitors. One was Spike and the other was Javelin. Spike is of Israel and Javelin is of the United States. It's of Javelin is by Raytheon and Spike is by Rafale. These are the two companies. Both were prepared to give either way and both were competitors in the highest sense. So therefore, in the ultimate, as he said in December 2000, the call had to be taken by having something which could help us indigenously. So we took a call in, I think, December 2017, if I recollect, that we will cancel the Spike order, despite Israel and India trying their best to see the order through. Now, having done that, we had VEM Technologies come in. Now, they fired a few rounds, and as per what the DRDO says, it was obviously development trials. And as correctly brought out, development trials, the user doesn't get involved. He may at best send an observer to observe. You can have observers even from the media. They have said the trials were successful. Now, VEM is saying that we are doing everything on our own. Now, it may be that I might say I am making the Maruti car on my own, but I may not disclose to you how is the engine coming from. I am making it in India. I may be getting the engine from Volkswagen, I may be getting the engine from... But VEM Technologies, whatever we described to you, even in the show, is an equivalent of the Javelin.
Okay.
And it's not necessary that everything must follow the checkered path. I mean to say, today, you can go to a mall to buy coriander, or you can also go to someone who opens a shop only on the footpath and doesn't pay any rent. And both give you the same coriander and possibly both are equally tasty. So these methods have been existing within our country. We don't want to get into greater details.
Okay.
So VEM Technologies, but a private player does have a way of getting across things. And within the rules, please, every rule is not known to us. Like I, for one, didn't know that what you call, whenever you get a labor, this thing, you are supposed to provide toilets, you're supposed to provide even a flush for making a building or a mall. I just went through the rules, that these are rules. So similarly, within the rules, DRDO is producing with a private player in mind.
Okay.
And obviously, DRDO is in contact with Israel, DRDO is in contact with the United States. Both, what you call Rafale is also making its factory in Hyderabad, look at the best part of it, and also VEM Technologies is from Hyderabad. So the city of Hyderabad, and now you'll ask me, why is Hyderabad? All our missiles, the research, whether you take RCI, Imarat and all these things, are in Hyderabad. So Hyderabad is the place where DRDO has its main this thing.
Okay.
So if you look at it, whoever comes, and don't forget, Israel is too close to the United States. They have even offered the Rafale to the United States. But you see, Trump has just made an announcement that nothing will be accepted as made in America unless 75% of the components are made in America.
Okay, so that's something which is obviously between Israel and US. But coming back to the Spike part and bringing in Sudhi here again. Sudhi, one, what do you make of this category of Spike missile which we are getting to? And since you keep a close watch and track on how things are moving in the indigenous defense sector. So that DRDO's version, how are we going about it, and how long before we can get our hands on that?
See, I mean, unfortunately, DRDO is much maligned, and perhaps it is for what they have done themselves. They cannot also, walk away from the blame. But that said, we must also understand that, building up these critical technologies take time. And it is no point in blaming DRDO completely, or no point in blaming the military completely, because the military will always think about, what do I do if I have to fight tomorrow? So we have to also understand their part of it, which is why it is very wrong to say our military only wants to go abroad and buy. No, every commander is very conscious of the fact that if the balloon goes up, he will be the man responsible, he will be responsible for his men, and the outcome of the battle, and therefore you have to equip them. That said, I think, while giving them, you need to give the military whatever they need for the immediate requirements so that they can get over it. If you look at the Balakot strikes, we had the Spice missiles. That is why we could, carry out such a successful strike. Now, DRDO or the other DPSUs or others may be developing a similar missile. But that doesn't mean you don't give the Spice or the Crystal Maze to the Indian Air Force. And similarly with the Army. I mean, the line of control is continuously active. And it is not, an anti-tank missile no longer is used only in an anti-tank, role. You do need to, and in the past, in this year or last year, you have used it on the line of control to take down bunkers, to take down obstacles. So while let the DRDO keep developing it, keep refining it, and give the Army, the ability to fight, to hold.
Okay, so this is one, major interim measure which gives Army that much push in its arsenal and firepower. Concluding comments from you, General Arora, on the way ahead from here onwards when we look at the ATGM segment.
Far too many cases are happening of acquisition under emergency powers or fast track procedure. Now, this means there was lethargy in procurement earlier. And at least some of the deficiencies are being made up through emergency powers or the fast track procedure. Remember, after the Uri attack, all three services resorted to the fast track procedure to require 2,000 crore rupees of ammunition to make up deficiencies and spare parts. And then came the assault rifle, then the missiles for the Air Force or bombs for the Air Force, and now these spike. It's okay that these deficiencies are being made up, but it points to a larger, lacuna in the system. I hope the government takes note and fixes this so that planning for procurement is smooth and all these equipments, weapon platforms, ammunition, everything comes in time. And the services don't suffer and they don't feel that operationally they are not prepared.
Okay, so these short-term interim measures are okay to meet the gaps and deficiencies, but long-term measures will have to be put in place. Concluding comments on that note from you, General Chakravorty.
Well, I'll be very honest with you. This will continue. This is the way, we are today. I'm going up to 2050 because I've just attended 2 war games on the issue, and I can only say that, we will have to resort to emergency purchases while the long term is being done indigenously. And therefore, I think that these, what you call emergency or these fast track procedures are extremely important for any armed forces, because ultimately we are heading on to a hybrid scenario where wars are not going to be conventional, or they are going to be irregular, they are going to be with terrorists, where you need the best weapons to do in minimum time. And to do that, I am afraid purely a long-term strategy will not be solely by itself the only way.
Okay, so these are 2 options and versions which will go hand in hand. As our panelists have pointed out, Spike missile being acquired by the Indian Army as an emergency purchase will definitely beat those deficiencies, bridge that gap and give that boost to Army's arsenal and firepower. But as our panelists are pointing out, the long-term measures of indigenous development of all these weapon systems or weapon platforms will need to be pushed further. We'll keep on coming to you next week as well with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.